Between 1950 and 1979, seniors living alone across America made 30 Sunday dinners using only 3 ingredients and 10 minutes, feeding themselves without help before microwave meals. These weren't gourmet recipes. These were the simple suppers widows and widowers made in empty kitchens after their spouses passed. The quick meals elderly parents prepared, the no-fuss dinners that required no fancy cooking skills. Tonight, we remember these 30 forgotten 3-ingredient Sunday dinners from the generation that cooked alone before anyone called it meal prep. The ham and cheese sandwich was the Sunday dinner millions of seniors living alone made when cooking for one person felt pointless. This wasn't a fancy deli creation. This was 2 slices of white bread, a slice of processed American cheese, and a piece of sliced ham from the corner grocery, assembled in 30 seconds at the kitchen counter and eaten standing up or sitting in front of the television. Seniors bought ham by the quarter pound, cheese in individual wrapped slices, and bread that lasted a week, creating a meal that cost 18 cents and required no dishes beyond a plate. Elderly Americans living alone ate bologna sandwiches for Sunday dinner more often than any other meal because bologna cost 29 cents per pound and never went bad in the refrigerator. This wasn't the gourmet charcuterie younger generations discovered decades later. This was Oscar Mayer bologna, sliced thin at the grocery counter, spread with mayonnaise on white bread, and eaten cold because turning on the stove for one person seemed wasteful. Widows and widowers bought bologna by the half-pound, a jar of Hellmann's mayonnaise that lasted months, and a loaf of Wonder Bread, creating Sunday suppers that required no cooking skills, no cleanup, and no pretending that cooking elaborate meals for one made sense. Seniors living alone made egg salad sandwiches for Sunday dinner using hard-boiled eggs prepared earlier in the week, mayonnaise, and white bread. This wasn't restaurant-style egg salad with fresh herbs and fancy mustards. This was Depression-era egg salad, made by mashing hard-boiled eggs with a fork directly on the bread, spreading mayonnaise from a jar, and eating it immediately before the bread got soggy. Elderly people boiled a dozen eggs on Monday, kept them refrigerated all week, and made egg salad whenever cooking felt too complicated, creating meals that cost 12 cents per sandwich and used ingredients that never spoiled. Between 1950 and 1976, widows and widowers across America made tuna salad sandwiches for Sunday dinner using canned tuna, mayonnaise, and white bread, because tuna never went bad in the pantry and required no refrigeration until opened. This wasn't albacore tuna salad with celery and fresh lemon. This was chicken of the sea tuna packed in oil, drained in the sink, mixed with Kraft mayonnaise directly in the can, and spread on Wonder Bread that came pre-sliced in plastic bags. Seniors living alone kept a case of tuna in the cupboard, making sandwiches in under 3 minutes, whenever loneliness made cooking seem pointless. Elderly Americans living alone ate peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for Sunday dinner because peanut butter and jelly never spoiled, cost almost nothing, and reminded them of raising children who had since moved away. This wasn't artisan almond butter on sprouted grain bread. This was Skippy peanut butter and Welch's grape jelly on white bread, assembled in 20 seconds at the kitchen counter and eaten while standing, because setting the table for one person felt depressing. Widows kept the same jar of peanut butter for months, the same jar of jelly for longer, making sandwiches that cost 9 cents and required no cooking, no cleanup, no pretending that elaborate Sunday dinners made sense when eating alone. 5 forgotten dinners down. 25 remain. These weren't meals people bragged about or served to guests. These were the suppers seniors made in empty kitchens after everyone left, the quick fixes that kept them fed when cooking felt pointless. Between 1950 and 1974, seniors living alone made liverwurst sandwiches for Sunday dinner using liverwurst sausage, bread, and mustard, because liverwurst was cheap protein that lasted weeks in the refrigerator without spoiling. This wasn't gourmet pâté on French bread. This was Oscar Mayer Braunschweiger liverwurst, sliced at the deli counter, spread thick on white bread with French's yellow mustard, and eaten cold because heating liverwurst never occurred to people who grew up eating it straight from the package. Elderly people bought liverwurst by the quarter pound for 35 cents, making sandwiches that tasted like iron and childhood memories, Sunday dinners that required no skill and no pretense that cooking for one deserved effort. Widows and widowers made deviled ham and crackers for Sunday dinner using canned Underwood deviled ham, saltine crackers, and butter, because deviled ham never went bad in the pantry and crackers never got stale in the tin. This wasn't fancy charcuterie served on artisan crackers. This was deviled ham spread directly from the little tin can onto Nabisco saltines, sometimes with a smear of butter if the crackers seemed too dry, eaten standing at the kitchen counter because setting a proper table for crackers felt ridiculous. Seniors kept cases of deviled ham in the cupboard, making meals in under 2 minutes whenever cooking seemed too complicated or too lonely. Elderly Americans living alone ate Vienna sausages and crackers for Sunday dinner because Vienna sausages came in pop-top cans that required no can opener and never spoiled on the shelf. This wasn't gourmet charcuterie. This was Armour Vienna sausages, packed in chicken broth, drained in the sink, eaten cold on saltine crackers, with a squeeze of French's yellow mustard, Sunday dinners, assembled in 90 seconds, and eaten directly from the can to avoid dirtying dishes. Widows and widowers bought Vienna sausages by the case for 19 cents per can, making meals that required no cooking, no cleanup, no acknowledging that Sunday dinners used to mean family. Seniors living alone made sardines on crackers for Sunday dinner using canned sardines, saltine crackers, and lemon juice, because sardines were cheap protein that never required refrigeration until opened. This wasn't upscale tinned fish served at wine bars. This was King Oscar sardines packed in oil, drained over the sink, mashed onto Ritz crackers with a fork, and squeezed with lemon juice from the plastic lemon-shaped bottle that lived in the refrigerator for months. Elderly people ate sardines cold, straight from the tin, making Sunday suppers that cost 24 cents and tasted like salt and loneliness, and memories of eating better meals when their spouses were still alive. Widows across America ate cottage cheese and canned fruit for Sunday dinner because cottage cheese was cheap protein and canned fruit counted as dessert, creating complete meals that required no cooking whatsoever. This wasn't Greek yogurt with fresh berries. This was Breakstone's cottage cheese from the dairy case, mixed with Del Monte canned peaches or pears, drained from heavy syrup, eaten with saltine crackers on the side, because crackers made it feel more like dinner than snack. Elderly women living alone bought small containers of cottage cheese for 39 cents, making Sunday suppers in under 3 minutes that required no dishes beyond a bowl, no pretending that elaborate cooking for one made sense anymore. The most comforting hot Sunday dinner seniors living alone made between 1950 and 1979 was the grilled cheese sandwich, requiring only bread, cheese, and butter because it took 5 minutes to cook, and reminded elderly widows of feeding children who had grown up and moved away. This wasn't artisan grilled cheese made with sourdough and aged cheddar from specialty shops. This was Wonder Bread white sandwich bread, Kraft Singles processed American cheese, and margarine from a tub, assembled at the counter and fried in a cast-iron skillet until the cheese melted and the bread turned golden brown. Seniors living alone bought bread for 29 cents per loaf, cheese in individually wrapped slices for 48 cents per package, and margarine that lasted months without refrigeration creating meals that cost 18 cents per sandwich and required one pan, one spatula, and 5 minutes of attention at the stove. Elderly people made grilled cheese on Sunday evenings when the house felt too quiet, when cooking elaborate meals seemed pointless, when the smell of melting cheese and toasted bread brought back memories of better times when someone else sat at the table. The sandwiches got eaten hot, cut diagonally out of habit, even though nobody was there to care about presentation, served on the same plates that used to hold Sunday pot roasts and fried chicken dinners, back when Sunday meant family. By the late 1970s, when pre-sliced cheese and pre-buttered bread made grilled cheese even simpler, it remained the default Sunday dinner for millions of elderly Americans eating alone in kitchens that once fed families. The fastest hot Sunday dinner elderly Americans made between 1952 and 1976 was the fried bologna sandwich, costing 15 cents and requiring only bologna, bread, and butter, because frying bologna took 3 minutes and created a hot meal without complicated cooking. This wasn't gourmet fried mortadella on ciabatta with fancy condiments. This was Oscar Mayer thick-cut bologna sliced at the deli counter for 29 cents per pound, fried in margarine in a cast-iron skillet until the edges curled up and the center puffed into a dome, then placed between 2 slices of white Wonder Bread and eaten immediately while still hot. Widows and widowers bought bologna by the half-pound, margarine in 1-pound tubs, and pre-sliced bread in plastic bags, creating Sunday suppers that required 1 pan, 1 spatula, and less than 5 minutes of actual cooking time. The bologna got fried over medium heat until it turned crispy around the edges and developed char marks in the center, creating texture and flavor that cold bologna sandwiches never achieved. Seniors ate fried bologna standing at the stove, sometimes adding a slice of American cheese that melted from the residual heat, sometimes eating it plain because condiments seemed like unnecessary effort when cooking for one. The sandwiches tasted like childhood, like Depression-era meals when meat was scarce and bologna was affordable protein, like Sunday dinners that used to involve more effort back when someone else was there to appreciate home cooking. By the mid-1970s, fried bologna remained a staple Sunday dinner for elderly people living alone. The simplest hot Sunday dinner seniors made between 1955 and 1978 was scrambled eggs and toast, requiring only eggs, milk, and bread, because scrambled eggs took 5 minutes to cook and provided cheap protein without complicated preparation. This wasn't French-style soft scrambled eggs with crème fraîche and fresh herbs. This was 2 eggs beaten with a splash of whole milk in a coffee cup, scrambled in margarine in a non-stick pan until they turned firm and slightly dry, then served on buttered toast cut into triangles, out of habit, even though nobody was watching. Elderly people bought eggs by the dozen for 48 cents, milk by the half-gallon for 59 cents, and bread by the loaf for 29 cents, creating Sunday suppers that cost 12 cents per meal and required 1 pan, 1 spatula, and the toaster. The eggs got scrambled over medium-low heat, stirred constantly with a fork until they formed large curds, cooked until completely set, because undercooked eggs seemed dangerous when eating alone, with nobody to help if something went wrong. Widows and widowers ate scrambled eggs at the kitchen table, sometimes reading the newspaper, sometimes staring at the empty chair across from them where someone used to sit during Sunday breakfast, when breakfast was a social meal instead of solitary routine. The toast got buttered while still hot, the eggs eaten directly from the pan to avoid dirtying extra plates, creating Sunday dinners that required minimal cleanup and no pretense that elaborate cooking made sense anymore. The most modern hot Sunday dinner seniors made between 1975 and 1979 was microwave scrambled eggs with cheese, requiring only eggs, cheese, and milk, because microwaves eliminated the need for stovetop cooking and reduced cleanup to a single bowl. This wasn't gourmet scrambled eggs made in copper pans with European butter. This was 2 eggs beaten with 2 tablespoons of milk in a microwave-safe bowl, cooked on high power for 45 seconds, stirred with a fork, microwaved another 45 seconds until set, then topped with a slice of American cheese that melted from residual heat. Elderly people who bought microwaves in the mid-1970s discovered they could make scrambled eggs in under 3 minutes without dirtying pans, without standing at the stove, without the physical effort that scrambling eggs in a skillet required when arthritis made stirring painful. The eggs got beaten directly in the serving bowl, cooked in 90-second intervals, eaten hot with a piece of buttered toast on the side, creating Sunday dinners that cost 14 cents and required no cleanup beyond rinsing 1 bowl and 1 fork. Seniors living alone appreciated microwave eggs because they could sit down while cooking, could avoid the stovetop entirely, could make hot meals without the energy that traditional cooking demanded. By 1979, microwave scrambled eggs became the default Sunday dinner for elderly Americans living alone in apartments and senior housing, where full kitchens felt too large and too lonely for one person. The quickest hot protein-rich Sunday dinner elderly Americans made between 1950 and 1975 was the fried egg sandwich, requiring only eggs, bread, and butter, because frying an egg took 3 minutes and created a complete meal without multiple ingredients or complicated preparation. This wasn't a breakfast sandwich from a fast food restaurant with bacon and cheese. This was 1 egg, fried in margarine in a cast-iron skillet until the white set completely and the yolk remained runny, placed between 2 slices of white Wonder Bread and eaten immediately while the yolk was still liquid enough to soak into the bread. Seniors bought eggs by the dozen, margarine by the pound, and bread by the loaf, creating Sunday suppers that cost 9 cents per sandwich and required 1 pan, 1 spatula, and less than 5 minutes at the stove. The egg got fried over medium heat, flipped once if the senior preferred hard yolks, or left sunny side up if they didn't mind runny centers, seasoned with salt and pepper kept in shakers beside the stove. Widows and widowers ate fried egg sandwiches standing in the kitchen, letting the yolk drip onto the plate, using the second slice of bread to wipe up what spilled, creating Sunday dinners that tasted like simplicity and solitude, and memories of weekend breakfasts when someone else cooked eggs to order and asked how you wanted them prepared. 15 meals down, 15 to go. We've moved from cold sandwiches to hot skillets, from no-cook crackers to eggs fried in margarine. These hot meals required turning on the stove, dirtying 1 pan, standing at the counter for 5 minutes. Small efforts that felt enormous when cooking alone. The sweetest hot Sunday dinner seniors made between 1952 and 1978 was French toast, requiring only bread, eggs, and milk, because French toast felt like dessert for dinner and reminded elderly widows of weekend breakfasts when their husbands were still alive. This wasn't brioche French toast with vanilla extract and cinnamon sugar. This was white Wonder Bread soaked in beaten eggs, mixed with milk, fried in margarine in a cast-iron skillet until golden brown on both sides, then eaten plain or with a drizzle of Caro corn syrup, because real maple syrup cost too much for one person eating alone. Seniors bought day-old bread at discount prices, eggs by the dozen, and milk by the half-gallon, creating Sunday suppers that cost 11 cents per serving and required 1 pan, 1 spatula, and 8 minutes of cooking time. The bread got soaked in egg mixture for just a few seconds per side, fried over medium heat until the egg coating set and turned golden, flipped once with a spatula, and cooked until both sides developed color. Elderly people ate French toast at the kitchen table, sometimes reading the Sunday newspaper, sometimes sitting in silence, remembering when French toast meant weekend mornings with coffee and conversation instead of solitary Sunday dinners eaten in quiet kitchens. The toast got eaten hot, cut into triangles out of habit, creating meals that tasted like nostalgia and sweetness, and the peculiar sadness of eating breakfast foods for dinner, when nobody else was there to question the choice. The most filling hot Sunday dinner elderly Americans made between 1950 and 1976 was Spam and eggs, requiring only canned Spam, eggs, and butter, because Spam never spoiled in the cupboard and provided salty protein that complemented scrambled eggs perfectly. This wasn't gourmet breakfast with artisan bacon and farm-fresh eggs. This was Hormel Spam, sliced thick from the can, fried in margarine until the edges crisped and the surface caramelized, then pushed to the side of the skillet while 2 eggs scrambled in the same pan, everything cooked together and eaten hot directly from the skillet to avoid dirtying plates. Seniors bought Spam for 69 cents per 12-ounce can, eggs by the dozen for 48 cents, and margarine by the pound, creating Sunday suppers that cost 23 cents per meal and required 1 pan, 1 spatula, and 7 minutes of cooking time. The Spam got sliced into quarter-inch thick pieces, fried over medium-high heat until it developed a crispy exterior. Then the eggs got scrambled in the rendered Spam fat until they formed large curds. Widows and widowers ate Spam and eggs standing at the stove, using the spatula as a utensil, savoring the combination of salty meat and rich eggs that reminded them of wartime meals when Spam was patriotic and breakfast felt communal. By the 1970s, Spam and eggs remained a Sunday dinner staple for elderly people living alone who remembered when canned meat was luxury instead of embarrassment. The most economical hot Sunday dinner seniors made between 1955 and 1979 was buttered noodles with Parmesan cheese, requiring only egg noodles, butter, and grated Parmesan, because noodles cooked in 8 minutes and provided filling carbohydrates without expensive ingredients or complicated sauces. This wasn't cacio e pepe, made with imported pecorino romano and freshly cracked black pepper. This was Pennsylvania Dutch extra-wide egg noodles, boiled in salted water until tender, drained in a colander, tossed with margarine from a tub, and sprinkled with Kraft grated Parmesan cheese from the green canister that lived in the refrigerator for months. Elderly people bought egg noodles for 39 cents per pound bag, margarine for 48 cents per pound, and Parmesan cheese for 69 cents per 8-ounce canister, creating Sunday suppers that cost 19 cents per serving and required 1 pot, 1 colander, and 1 fork. The noodles got boiled in enough water to cover them completely, cooked until they were soft and swollen, drained thoroughly so the butter wouldn't get watered down. Seniors ate buttered noodles directly from the pot to avoid dirtying bowls, standing at the stove or sitting at the kitchen table, savoring the simple combination of butter and cheese and pasta that required no culinary skill and no pretense. By the late 1970s, buttered noodles remained the default Sunday dinner for elderly Americans living alone who needed filling meals that cost almost nothing and required minimal effort. The cheapest hot Sunday dinner elderly Americans made between 1950 and 1975 was beans on toast, requiring only canned baked beans, bread, and butter, because canned beans cost 19 cents and provided protein, fiber, and enough calories to constitute a complete meal. This wasn't British-style beans on toast with Heinz beans and thick-cut toast. This was Van Camp's pork and beans heated in a saucepan for 5 minutes, spooned over white Wonder Bread toast, spread with margarine, and eaten hot with a fork while the beans soaked into the bread until it turned to mush. Seniors bought canned beans by the case when they went on sale, bread by the loaf, and margarine by the pound, creating Sunday suppers that cost 14 cents per serving and required 1 pot, 1 spoon, and the toaster. The beans got heated over medium-low heat, stirred occasionally to prevent sticking, warmed until they bubbled and steam rose from the surface. Elderly people ate beans on toast at the kitchen table, cutting the toast into pieces with the side of a fork, mixing beans and bread together until they formed a homogeneous mass that was easier to eat with dentures. Widows and widowers appreciated beans on toast because it was hot, filling, required minimal effort, and created the illusion of home-cooked Sunday dinner without actually cooking. By the 1970s, beans on toast remained a weekly staple for millions of seniors living alone on fixed incomes. The most nostalgic hot Sunday dinner seniors made between 1952 and 1978 was hot dogs and beans, requiring only hot dogs, canned baked beans, and ketchup, because it reminded elderly Americans of summer picnics and backyard barbecues when their families still gathered together. This wasn't gourmet sausages with artisan baked beans. This was Oscar Mayer beef franks, boiled in water for 5 minutes, served alongside Van Camp's pork and beans heated on the stove, with a squirt of Heinz ketchup on top, eaten hot from a bowl with a fork. Seniors bought hot dogs for 49 cents per pound package, canned beans for 19 cents per 16-ounce can, and ketchup in glass bottles that lasted months, creating Sunday suppers that cost 28 cents per meal and required 1 pot for the hot dogs, 1 saucepan for the beans, and 8 minutes of cooking time total. The hot dogs got boiled until they plumped and the skins split slightly, the beans heated until bubbles formed around the edges, everything served together in the same bowl to reduce dishwashing. Elderly people ate hot dogs and beans at the kitchen table, cutting the franks into bite-sized pieces with a fork, mixing everything together with ketchup until it resembled the childhood meals they remembered from the Depression, when hot dogs were special occasion food. By the late 1970s, hot dogs and beans remained comfort food for widows and widowers eating alone on Sunday evenings in quiet houses. The most restaurant-style hot Sunday dinner seniors living alone made between 1950 and 1979 was the tuna melt, requiring only canned tuna, cheese, and bread because it felt fancy enough to serve guests, but simple enough to make in 8 minutes, using ingredients that never spoiled in the pantry. This wasn't an upscale tuna melt from a diner with sourdough bread and sharp cheddar cheese melted under a salamander broiler. This was chicken-of-the-sea tuna packed in vegetable oil and drained in the sink, mixed with enough Kraft mayonnaise to hold it together, spread on white Wonder Bread, topped with a slice of Kraft Singles processed American cheese, and broiled in the oven until the cheese bubbled and turned golden brown at the edges. Elderly Americans living alone bought canned tuna for 29 cents per 6-ounce can when it went on sale, cheese in individually wrapped slices for 48 cents per package, and pre-sliced bread for 29 cents per loaf, creating Sunday suppers that cost 31 cents per serving and required 1 bowl for mixing tuna, 1 baking sheet for broiling, and 8 minutes total from start to finish. The tuna got drained thoroughly by pressing it against the side of the can with a fork, mixed with just enough mayonnaise to create spreadable consistency without making it too wet, seasoned with salt and pepper kept in shakers beside the stove. Seniors spread the tuna mixture thick on bread, added cheese on top, and placed everything on a baking sheet under the broiler set to high heat, watching carefully through the oven window, because tuna melts could go from perfectly melted to burned in 30 seconds. The cheese bubbled and browned, the edges of the bread toasted crispy, and the tuna heated through until it was warm but not dry. Widows and widowers ate tuna melts at the kitchen table, cutting them diagonally with a knife, because tuna melts felt special enough to deserve proper presentation even when eating alone. The sandwiches tasted like restaurant food, like the lunch counter at Woolworth's, where tuna melts cost 65 cents, and came with pickle spears and potato chips. Like the rare occasions when someone else cooked and served food on real plates with paper napkins. Elderly people made tuna melts on Sundays when they wanted something more elaborate than cold sandwiches, but couldn't justify cooking an entire roast or casserole for one person. When they needed to feel like Sunday dinner still meant something, even though nobody else was there to eat it. By the late 1970s, tuna melts remained a special occasion Sunday dinner for millions of seniors living alone who remembered when melted cheese on top of anything automatically made it fancy. The fanciest hot Sunday dinner elderly Americans made between 1955 and 1978 was Welsh rarebit, requiring only cheese, milk, and toast, because it sounded sophisticated but actually just meant melted cheese sauce poured over bread, a Depression-era supper that felt elegant when eaten alone on Sunday evenings. This wasn't authentic Welsh rarebit made with aged cheddar, beer, Worcestershire sauce, and dry mustard powder. This was Velveeta cheese cubed and melted with whole milk in a saucepan over low heat, stirred constantly until it formed a smooth sauce, then poured over toasted white bread and eaten immediately with a fork and knife like it was a proper plated dinner instead of cheese on toast. Seniors bought Velveeta in 2-pound boxes for 98 cents, milk by the half-gallon for 59 cents, and bread by the loaf for 29 cents, creating Sunday suppers that cost 24 cents per serving and required one saucepan, one wooden spoon for stirring, the toaster, and 8 minutes of cooking time. The cheese got cut into small cubes so it would melt faster and more evenly, combined with milk in roughly equal proportions, heated over the lowest burner setting because high heat made the cheese separate and turn grainy. Elderly people stirred the mixture constantly, watching it transform from chunky to smooth, adding more milk if it seemed too thick, or letting it cook longer if it seemed too thin. Adjusting by instinct, developed over decades of Depression-era cooking when making do with what you had was the only option. The toast got made while the cheese melted, buttered lightly, placed on a plate, and covered with hot cheese sauce that soaked into the bread and created the illusion of a home-cooked Sunday dinner that required actual effort and technique. Widows and widowers ate Welsh rarebit sitting at the kitchen table with proper utensils and paper napkins, pretending it was a real meal instead of just cheese on toast, savoring the creamy sauce and the ritual of eating something that felt formal even though nobody else was there to witness it. By the 1970s, Welsh rarebit remained a Sunday dinner staple for elderly people living alone who needed to feel like cooking still mattered occasionally. The spiciest hot Sunday dinner seniors made between 1960 and 1979 was canned chili and crackers, requiring only canned chili, crackers, and shredded cheese, because chili heated in 5 minutes and provided protein, beans, and enough flavor to feel like a complete meal instead of just opening a can. This wasn't Texas-style chili made from scratch with dried chilies and chunks of beef simmered for hours. This was Hormel chili with beans opened with a can opener, dumped into a saucepan, heated over medium-low heat until it bubbled, then served in a bowl with saltine crackers on the side and a handful of shredded cheddar cheese on top that melted from the residual heat. Elderly Americans bought canned chili for 49 cents per 15-ounce can, crackers in 4-sleeve boxes for 59 cents, and pre-shredded cheese in plastic bags for 78 cents, creating Sunday suppers that cost 47 cents per serving and required one pot, one spoon, one bowl, and 5 minutes of heating time. The chili got stirred occasionally while heating to prevent the bottom from scorching, warmed until steam rose from the surface and small bubbles formed around the edges, then immediately removed from heat because overcooked canned chili turned into a paste-like consistency that stuck to dentures. Seniors ate chili directly from the heating pot to avoid dirtying extra bowls, or poured it into a proper serving bowl when they wanted Sunday dinner to feel more formal, crumbling crackers on top until the chili was thick enough to eat with a spoon without dripping. The cheese got sprinkled generously on top, melting into orange pools that mixed with the red chili and created the kind of colorful meal that looked intentional on a tray table in front of the television. Widows and widowers appreciated canned chili because it was hot, filling, spicy enough to have actual flavor, and came in single-serving cans that eliminated the problem of leftovers nobody would eat. By the late 1970s, canned chili and crackers remained a weekly Sunday dinner for millions of elderly people living alone who needed meals that felt substantial, without requiring cooking skills or energy they no longer possessed. The warmest comfort food Sunday dinner elderly Americans made between 1950 and 1978 was canned soup and crackers, requiring only Campbell's condensed soup, crackers, and butter, because soup heated in 5 minutes and reminded seniors of childhood sick days when mothers brought soup on trays. This wasn't homemade chicken noodle soup simmered from scratch with vegetables and herbs. This was Campbell's condensed tomato soup, or chicken noodle soup, mixed with 1 can of water in a saucepan, heated until it bubbled, then poured into a bowl and served with buttered saltine crackers on the side, eaten hot while watching television or reading the Sunday newspaper. Seniors bought condensed soup for 19 cents per can when it went on sale, crackers in 4-sleeve boxes for 59 cents, and margarine by the pound for 48 cents, creating Sunday suppers that cost 23 cents per serving and required 1 pot, 1 can opener, 1 spoon, and 5 minutes of heating time. The soup got opened with a manual can opener that left sharp edges on the lid, dumped into a saucepan with an equal amount of tap water, stirred to break up the condensed paste, and heated over medium heat until bubbles formed around the edges and steam rose from the surface. Elderly people ate soup directly from the heating pot to minimize dishwashing, or poured it into a proper bowl when Sunday dinner needed to feel more ceremonial, buttering crackers while the soup cooled enough to eat without burning their mouths. The crackers got eaten alongside the soup or crumbled directly into the bowl until the soup thickened into a porridge-like consistency that was easier to eat with dentures or sensitive teeth. Widows and widowers made canned soup on Sunday evenings when the house felt too cold or too quiet, when hot liquid felt more comforting than solid food, when memories of being cared for during childhood illness made eating alone feel slightly less lonely. By the 1970s, canned soup and crackers remained the default sick day and sad day Sunday dinner for millions of seniors living alone who needed warmth more than nutrition, comfort more than flavor, the ritual of eating something hot more than actual hunger satisfaction. The heartiest hot Sunday dinner seniors made between 1950 and 1976 was canned corned beef hash with a fried egg on top, requiring only canned hash, eggs, and butter, because hash was dense enough to feel like a complete meal, and the egg added protein without requiring additional ingredients. This wasn't homemade corned beef hash made from leftover brisket, potatoes, and onions chopped by hand and fried until crispy. This was Hormel Mary Kitchen corned beef hash, opened from a 15-ounce can, dumped into a cast-iron skillet, fried in margarine over medium-high heat until the bottom developed a crispy brown crust, then topped with a fried egg that cooked in the same pan, everything served hot, directly from the skillet, to avoid dirtying plates. Elderly Americans bought canned hash for 59 cents per can, eggs by the dozen for 48 cents, and margarine by the pound, creating Sunday suppers that cost 53 cents per serving and required 1 skillet, 1 spatula, and 8 minutes of cooking time. The hash got pressed flat in the heated skillet, left undisturbed for 4 minutes until the bottom layer crisped and turned golden brown, then flipped in sections with a metal spatula to crisp the other side. Seniors cracked an egg directly into the center of the hash, let it fry until the white set completely and the yolk remained runny, then ate everything together with a fork. By the 1970s, canned hash with egg remained a Sunday dinner staple for elderly people living alone who needed meals that felt like actual cooking without requiring fresh ingredients or complicated preparation. 25 meals down, 5 remain. These last recipes required the most effort: melted cheese, fried hash, broiled sandwiches. The final 5 represent the peak of what seniors living alone could manage on Sundays, the meals that felt almost like real cooking before everything became too difficult. The most nostalgic Sunday dinner elderly Americans made between 1960 and 1979 was instant mashed potatoes with gravy, requiring only instant potato flakes, gravy mix, and butter, because it reminded seniors of traditional Sunday pot roast dinners without requiring hours of cooking or an expensive roast. This wasn't real mashed potatoes made from peeled russet potatoes boiled and whipped with cream and butter. This was Hungry Jack instant mashed potato flakes mixed with boiling water and margarine in a bowl, stirred until they formed smooth potatoes, then topped with brown gravy made from McCormick gravy mix whisked with water in a saucepan. Everything ready in 5 minutes and eaten hot while pretending it was the Sunday dinners they used to make when their spouses were alive. Seniors bought instant potato flakes in cardboard boxes for 68 cents, gravy mix in packets for 29 cents each, and margarine by the pound, creating Sunday suppers that cost 31 cents per serving and required 1 bowl for potatoes, 1 saucepan for gravy, a whisk, and 5 minutes total preparation time. The water got boiled in a kettle or saucepan, poured over the potato flakes according to package directions that were printed large enough for elderly eyes to read without glasses, stirred vigorously until the flakes absorbed all the water and transformed into something resembling actual mashed potatoes. The gravy got made simultaneously in another pan, whisking the powder with cold water first to prevent lumps, then heating over medium heat while stirring constantly until it thickened and bubbled. Elderly people ate instant potatoes and gravy sitting at the kitchen table with proper utensils, pretending it was a real Sunday dinner instead of just reconstituted flakes and powdered sauce, savoring the familiar flavors that reminded them of holiday meals and family gatherings when someone else did the cooking and the table was full of people. Widows and widowers appreciated instant potatoes because they never spoiled in the cupboard, required no peeling or chopping, created the illusion of home-cooked Sunday dinner without the effort that traditional potato recipes demanded. The texture of instant potatoes was never quite right, slightly gummy, too smooth, lacking the natural lumps and irregularity of hand-mashed potatoes. But elderly people living alone didn't care about perfect texture when eating by themselves. The gravy was the critical component that made instant potatoes feel like actual Sunday dinner, transforming plain reconstituted flakes into something that resembled the meat and potatoes meals that defined American Sunday dinners throughout the 20th century. The brown gravy powder contained enough salt and artificial beef flavor to taste convincing when nobody was comparing it directly to real pan drippings from a roasted beef. Seniors who had made gravy from scratch for decades, who knew how to make roux and deglaze roasting pans, by the late 1970s, instant mashed potatoes with gravy remained a weekly Sunday dinner for millions of seniors living alone, who needed comfort food that tasted like tradition without requiring traditional cooking skills or energy or the motivation to cook elaborate meals for one person eating alone in silent kitchens where Sunday dinners used to mean family gathered around tables that now sat empty every night. The cheapest hot Sunday dinner seniors made between 1975 and 1979 was instant ramen with egg, requiring only ramen noodles, eggs, and butter, because ramen cost 12 cents per package and cooked in 3 minutes, making it the most economical meal available to elderly people living on fixed Social Security incomes. This wasn't gourmet ramen with homemade broth, fresh vegetables, and perfectly soft-boiled eggs. This was top ramen or Maruchan instant noodles, boiled in water, with the flavor packet, topped with a raw egg cracked directly into the boiling broth that cooked from residual heat, eaten hot from the pot with a fork to avoid dirtying bowls. Seniors bought ramen in bulk packages of 12 for under $2, eggs by the dozen for 48 cents, and margarine by the pound, creating Sunday suppers that cost 14 cents per serving and required 1 pot, 1 fork, and 5 minutes from start to finish. The water got boiled in a small saucepan. The dried noodles added along with the seasoning packet. Everything cooked for 3 minutes while stirring occasionally to separate the noodles. Elderly people cracked an egg into the center of the pot during the final minute of cooking, let it poach in the hot broth until the white set and the yolk remained slightly runny, then ate everything directly from the pot while standing at the stove, because sitting down made it feel too much like admitting that ramen noodles constituted Sunday dinner. The broth was salty enough to taste like actual food instead of just boiled noodles. The egg added protein and richness that made it feel more substantial, and the entire meal was hot, filling, and required almost no effort or money. Widows and widowers living alone in the late 1970s discovered instant ramen when grocery stores started stocking it in the soup aisle, recognizing immediately that 12-cent meals solved the problem of feeding themselves on Social Security budgets that couldn't afford traditional Sunday dinners anymore. The ramen came in flavors like chicken, beef, and oriental, though they all tasted essentially the same, intensely salty with a hint of whatever flavoring the packet claimed to represent. Seniors who had lived through the Depression recognized instant ramen as the modern equivalent of Depression-era poverty meals, the kind of cheap sustenance that kept people fed when money ran out before the month ended. The noodles were pre-cooked and flash-fried before packaging, requiring only rehydration in boiling water, designed for college students and bachelors, but equally useful for elderly people who couldn't afford real food anymore. The egg transformed ramen from student snack food into something resembling actual dinner, adding protein and fat that made the meal more satisfying and nutritionally complete. Elderly people learned to crack the egg gently into the center of the pot so it wouldn't break and disperse throughout the broth, preferring to keep the egg intact so it looked more like real food and less like desperation. The yolk stayed runny in the center, turning the broth creamy and rich when broken with a fork, creating a sauce that coated the noodles and made everything taste more substantial. Seniors ate ramen standing in kitchens where Sunday dinners used to mean pot roast and family, where tables once held multiple dishes and conversations, where cooking had been a social activity instead of solitary survival. The pot got rinsed immediately while still hot, the only cleanup required, and elderly people returned to their televisions or their newspapers or their empty living rooms, bellies full of sodium and carbohydrates, hearts full of memories of better Sunday dinners. The fastest hot Sunday dinner elderly Americans made between 1960 and 1978 was canned spaghetti, requiring only canned spaghetti, Parmesan cheese, and butter, because it heated in 3 minutes, and reminded seniors of Italian restaurants without requiring boiling pasta or making sauce from scratch. This wasn't real spaghetti with homemade marinara sauce and fresh basil. This was Chef Boyardee spaghetti and meatballs, or Franco-American spaghetti and tomato sauce, opened with a can opener, dumped into a bowl, heated in the microwave for 2 minutes, or on the stovetop for 5, then topped with grated Parmesan cheese from the green Kraft canister. Elderly people ate canned spaghetti directly from the heating bowl to minimize dishwashing, sprinkling Parmesan cheese generously on top because the cheese made it taste more like restaurant food and less like something that came from a can. The margarine got added last, melting into yellow pools that mixed with the tomato sauce and created a richer flavor than the plain canned sauce provided. Widows and widowers appreciated canned spaghetti because it was hot, filling, required no cooking skills, never spoiled in the pantry, and tasted enough like Italian food to feel special even though it cost less than 50 cents and took 3 minutes to prepare. The noodles were pre-cooked and soft, already cut into short lengths that fit easily on a spoon, designed for children but perfect for elderly people with dentures or sensitive teeth who couldn't chew al dente pasta anymore. The tomato sauce was sweeter than homemade marinara, containing more sugar than authentic Italian sauce, but that sweetness appealed to Depression-era palates that associated sweetness with luxury and special occasions. Seniors who had never eaten at Italian restaurants before the 1950s recognized canned spaghetti as their introduction to Italian-American cuisine, the gateway food that made pasta acceptable to people who grew up eating meat and potatoes. The meatballs in Chef Boyardee were small and soft, more filler than meat, but they provided protein and made the meal feel more substantial than just noodles in sauce. Elderly people living alone often bought variety packs containing different canned pasta shapes, spaghetti, ravioli, beefaroni, rotating through them to create the illusion of menu variety, even though they all tasted essentially the same. The cans, stacked easily in cupboards, required no refrigeration, had printed expiration dates years in the future, and could be opened and heated even during power outages using a camping stove or sterno can. By the late 1970s, canned spaghetti remained a regular Sunday dinner for millions of seniors living alone, who needed meals that felt like actual dinners instead of just sustenance, who wanted something that resembled the restaurant meals they used to eat when going out to dinner meant celebration instead of loneliness, who appreciated that Italian food could come from a can and still taste like comfort. The most filling hot Sunday dinner seniors made between 1965 and 1978 was canned hash browns with scrambled eggs, requiring only canned hash brown potatoes, eggs, and butter because the combination provided carbohydrates and protein in one skillet and tasted like diner breakfast served for dinner. This wasn't homemade hash browns made from fresh potatoes shredded on a box grater and fried until crispy. This was Aunt Jemima canned hash brown potatoes, drained from the can, fried in margarine in a cast-iron skillet until the bottoms turned golden brown and developed crispy edges, then pushed to one side while 2 eggs scrambled in the same pan, everything cooked together and eaten hot directly from the skillet. Elderly Americans bought canned hash browns for 48 cents per 15-ounce can, eggs by the dozen, and margarine by the pound, creating Sunday suppers that cost 39 cents per serving and required 1 skillet, 1 spatula, and 8 minutes of cooking time. The hash browns got drained thoroughly in a colander to remove excess moisture that would prevent browning, pressed flat in the heated skillet with the back of a spatula, and left undisturbed for 4 minutes until the bottom layer crisped and turned golden. Seniors flipped the hash browns in sections, crisping the other side, then pushed them to one side of the pan and cracked eggs into the cleared space, scrambling them until they formed large curds. Appreciated canned hash browns because they eliminated the physical labor of grating raw potatoes, a task that required grip strength and repetitive motion that caused pain. The hash browns browned best when the skillet was hot before adding them, when the margarine melted and sizzled, when the potatoes got pressed flat and left alone long enough to develop that crispy golden crust on the bottom. Seniors learned through trial and error that moving the potatoes too soon prevented browning, that too much moisture prevented crisping, that medium-high heat worked better than high heat, which burned the outside before the inside heated through. The eggs cooked quickly in the same pan, absorbing the potato flavor and the margarine, scrambling into soft curds that mixed with the crispy hash browns when everything got stirred together before eating. By the mid-1970s, canned hash browns with eggs remained a Sunday dinner staple for elderly people living alone who needed filling meals that tasted like comfort food and required only one pan and minimal cleanup afterward, who remembered when breakfast for dinner was something their mothers made during the Depression when dinner food was too expensive or too complicated to prepare. The simplest hot Sunday dinner elderly Americans made between 1975 and 1979 was the microwave hot dog, requiring only hot dogs, bread, and ketchup, because microwaves eliminated boiling water and reduced cooking time to 90 seconds, making hot dogs the fastest possible hot meal for seniors living alone with limited energy. This wasn't a grilled hot dog from a backyard barbecue with charred grill marks and smoky flavor. This was an Oscar Mayer beef frank placed on a paper towel, microwaved on high power for 1 minute until it plumped and steamed, then placed in a cheap white hot dog bun and topped with a squirt of Heinz ketchup from the plastic squeeze bottle, eaten immediately while still hot. Seniors who bought microwaves in the mid-1970s discovered they could make hot dogs in 90 seconds without dirtying pots or standing at the stove, without the physical effort that boiling water required when arthritis made lifting heavy pots painful and dangerous. Elderly people bought hot dogs in pound packages for 49 cents, buns in packages of 8 for 39 cents, and ketchup in bottles that lasted months. The microwave revolutionized hot dog preparation for seniors living alone because it eliminated every barrier that made boiling hot dogs difficult. No heavy pot of water to lift and carry to the sink afterward. No risk of burns from boiling water splashing. No waiting for water to boil, which could take 10 minutes on an electric stove. No need to fish hot dogs out of scalding water with tongs or a fork. The microwave method was foolproof even for seniors with memory problems or confusion, requiring only placing the hot dog on a paper towel and pressing the 1-minute button, impossible to mess up or burn. The hot dogs emerged from the microwave plump and steaming, slightly drier than boiled hot dogs but still juicy enough to taste good, hot enough to warm the bun when placed inside. Elderly people who lived through the Depression remembered when hot dogs were luxury food, when getting a hot dog at a baseball game or street cart was a special treat, when frankfurters represented American abundance and prosperity. By the late 1970s, hot dogs had become so cheap and ubiquitous that they represented poverty food instead of celebration. But seniors who remembered the 1930s still associated hot dogs with better times. The microwave made hot dogs accessible even to the frailest elderly Americans, the ones whose hands shook too much to safely handle boiling water, whose memories failed too often to remember to turn off the stove, whose energy levels couldn't sustain standing at the stove for the time it took to boil water and cook hot dogs. By 1979, microwave hot dogs became the default Sunday dinner for the oldest and frailest elderly Americans living alone, the ones for whom even scrambled eggs required too much effort, who needed calories and warmth more than nostalgia or tradition or the pretense that Sunday dinners still meant family gatherings around tables that now sat empty every single night, who ate standing up because sitting down at a table alone felt too depressing to endure. 30 forgotten Sunday dinners, gone. Between 1950 and 1979, elderly Americans living alone made these 3-ingredient meals in under 10 minutes, feeding themselves when cooking felt pointless and eating alone felt unbearable. These weren't recipes anyone wrote down or passed to grandchildren. These were survival meals, The simple suppers widows and widowers assembled in silent kitchens where Sunday dinners used to mean family. Tonight, we've remembered the generation that ate alone before meal kits and delivery apps, who made ham sandwiches and canned soup when nobody else was coming to dinner. These are the meals loneliness tastes like.